So welcome to our second Sunday Sangha, International Sangha mini retreat. So I'd like to begin by just a very, very brief review of what we explored last Sunday in our first mini retreat. And so last week we looked at the first part or the first domain of the first factor of awakening, the first factor of awakening being mindfulness. And last week we explored mindfulness of the body in the body. So I hope that each of you had a really, really good week of embodied mindfulness practice. This week, well, first I'd like to just list the factors of awakening again. I might list them every week just as a reminder. The first being mindfulness, and the four parts of mindfulness. The first being body, the second being feelings, Vedana in Pali, which is what we'll explore today. The third being mindfulness of mental activity, Nama, and we will explore that today as well. And the fourth foundation or domain of mindfulness being Dhammas, or truths, or the way of things, which we will also explore today. So that's the first foundation, or the first of our factors of awakening, factors of enlightenment. The second factor of enlightenment is investigation. The third, energy or effort, they go together. The fourth being joy. Fifth being tranquility. The sixth being concentration. And the seventh being equanimity. So today, as I just briefly mentioned, we'll be exploring the next three domains or the next three establishments of mindfulness, with mindfulness being the overarching factor, the overarching capacity or quality of awakening, of enlightenment. And we'll begin today's exploration with Vedana in Pali, feeling in English. And in the Buddha Dhamma, the Vedana or feeling tone of our experiences are what we're going to explore. The feeling tone of pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant, what we could call neutral. These feeling tones occur with every experience, in relationship to every experience that we have in the body, mind, and heart, to some degree, sometimes overtly and sometimes subtly. So settle into your seat, comfortable sitting place and position. Drink your last sip of tea or coffee or juice or whatever it is. And let your cup rest. And let your body, heart, and mind settle in. I'll offer a short Dhamma reflection about feelings, Vedana, and then we'll sit together for approximately 40 minutes with the mindful connection and recognition of the feeling tone in relationship to what we're experiencing with whatever body-mind experience shows up. And I'll offer a bit of guidance at the beginning of the formal sit after I offer you a short Dhamma reflection. So this second domain of mindfulness of feeling, Vedana Nupassana in Pali. And I'm offering the Pali for some of what we're talking about, because I know that some of you are interested in the Pali, the original language that the Buddha taught in. Some of you are interested in the Pali words for some of the Buddha Dhamma. This foundation or establishment of mindfulness is potentially a particularly illuminating aspect of our practice towards directing our natural inclination to the right place and in the right way. Every experience that comes through each of the sense doors, touching the body, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and the mind door, thinking, provides some kind of specific information to the mind. And there are particular feelings that occur through sense door contact with all of the various phenomena that we experience. So from the perspective of the Buddha Dhamma, these feelings are very simply and clearly classified into three groups, as I've already mentioned: pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, and neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, what we can call neutral feeling. And these feelings or feeling tones arise in response to either physical or mental stimuli. Attachment, emotional attachment or aversion to sense door experience is a result that quite often quickly follows along directly from these feelings. So for instance, when we experience a pleasant feeling in relationship to some physical or mental contact with some object, for most people, there's almost an immediate emotional attachment to the pleasant feeling or to the object or to both. And then when the pleasant feeling subsides, which of course it always does, the desire might come up to get it back or to get another one. And it can come quite quickly. It can be subtle or it can be quite overt. A craving then is arising. And with craving, usually immediately immediately following or preceded to craving quickly, there's a sense of dissatisfaction because the pleasant feeling is fading or maybe fully disappeared. And so this dissatisfaction is what fuels the greed or craving. And what's happened? Our peace, our pleasant abiding, our sense of well-being has been disturbed. The nature of dissatisfaction is agitation, a kind of inner restlessness of the body and the mind. And this translates into what we usually call stress, mental and physical stress. The experience of craving itself is experienced as some degree of a burning contraction. If we really truly experience it, if we really truly see it clearly, sense it and see it clearly. So again, what are we experiencing? We're experiencing stress. when we experience unpleasant feeling in relationship to some physical or mental contact with some object. Most people almost immediately experience an emotional dislike or some form of aversion, maybe fear or boredom, or maybe hatred or anger or disappointment. We might want to get rid of this object. We might want to get away from the object or the feeling, or both. So again, our mental peace is disturbed. Again, we're feeling stress. As we begin to sense and see and know our experience more and more clearly, we find out that so much of stress, so much of the suffering, stressful suffering in this life comes directly from one's relationship to experience pleasant and unpleasant feelings. When the feeling is, at least to some degree, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, when the feeling is neutral, often for many people, the tendency is to just ignore what's going on, to not connect to the present moment's experience. And sometimes it's accompanied with a subtle or maybe not so subtle state of not wanting, really not interested in being with the experience of the moment. I think it's fair to say that most of us are intense experience junkies. If it's intense, we're likely to pay attention, whether it's pleasant or whether it's unpleasant. And if it's not intense, we often just don't notice. We might think nothing's happening. So again, we're craving something, or maybe experiencing the aversion of boredom, or both. Without an intimate and careful, mindful attention to feelings, they have the potential power to disturb us emotionally. They have the potential power to make us suffer. An amazing thing about these feelings is that we often forget that they change. In fact, the very same object that produced pleasant feelings in the mind, sometimes just within moments can produce unpleasant feelings in the mind, or vice versa. So again, we're experiencing attachment, clinging, and or various aversive states. Forgetting is the opposite of remembering, remembering. The connection that mindfulness offers to see things just as they are. Many years ago, when I was sitting a 3-month retreat at the Insight Meditation Society, one day I found a note from the person whose stash was next to mine on a shelf in the back dining room at the Insight Meditation Society. And I had absolutely no idea who this person was. The note was offering me some green tea. Well, a very pleasant feeling arose. I was noticed. A gift being offered to me, capital M-E. And I happen to like green tea. So I offered the note, put a note on this person's stash, just saying thank you. Well, the next day, another note appeared on my stash from this same person, offering me a hat. The person seemed to notice me going outside without one. And it was getting cool outside. Well, a tinge of unpleasant arose in the mind. I felt impinged upon. The attention was not appreciated, not liked. But I answered the note politely and thanked him and said, I have a hat, thank you. Then the next day, a third note appeared. This was a question about practice. And a most decidedly unpleasant feeling arose in the mind, followed by a quick, unmindful reaction in the mind to write back a not so polite note. But fortunately, mindfulness and wise discernment kicked in, and I just simply relaxed, let go, and didn't respond at all. And the note stopped, never got another one after that. As I think probably all of you would agree, when we feel pleasant or unpleasant as a result of some contact through some sense door, the pleasant and unpleasant feeling isn't in the external object, nor is the feeling within an internal object of attention, such as a bodily sensation or a thought. The feeling is in the mind. So, what is it that most often is the root of the feeling that arises in relationship to our experiences? Well, in my 3-month retreat story, the mental feeling tone and the subsequent actions of responding to the first 2 notes, and the mental feeling tone followed by a reaction in my mind to the 3rd note, were all very clearly coming from a place of me, a place of self. Me, myself, and I. When we begin to see that all of the feelings we experience are within our own mind, that we ourselves are primarily responsible for the feelings that we experience, we begin to know that we really can't blame others for the way we feel. What for many of us are long habituated stories, or maybe short habituated stories, storylines such as, he made me angry. She made me just feel terrible. He made me feel so happy. This place, these people make me feel so peaceful. This place, these people make me feel miserable. As we begin to pay a very careful attention to the feelings that arise, the habituated storylines actually begin to lose their strength. The habituated storylines begin to fall apart. In the light of seeing things clearly, blaming others for our pleasant or unpleasant mental feelings isn't realistic. It's actually not the way things work. The potentially illuminating aspect of practice in relationship to cultivating a careful attention to feeling is that at this point in our experience, it's at this point in our experience that we have the opportunity to drop our habituated reactions of attachment and clinging, and the habituated reactions of the various permutations of aversion. It's at this point in our experience of noticing the feelings of pleasant and unpleasant, or the feelings of neutral, that we can in moments just see, experience, and know bodily sensation, visual forms, odors, sound, taste, and the manifestation of various thought forms. Know the attendant feeling tone, and that just be that. In that moment, there's no mental suffering. The heart and mind are not disturbed. It's a moment of ease, a moment of peace. When you engage with the full presence in the physical and mental experiences that are happening in your body and mind, and when any of these experiences show up as being pleasant or unpleasant, or maybe neutral, one aspect of our practice is to be mindfully aware without making something out of it. Without making something out of it. Meaning without interpreting, without speculating, without analyzing, without evaluating. As we meet and connect to experience with an unfettered mindful presence, we find open-hearted interest and authenticity, which brings clarity to the seeing, sensing, and knowing of our experience. Feelings are particularly important mental factors in developing insight into the cause of suffering, because these feelings are what condition our mind to hold on to the pleasant, to push away, avoid, or ignore the unpleasant. Learning to mindfully observe feelings with more clarity and more balance, with less attachment, aversion, and with less personal identification is an important and very, very helpful door to open on our way towards awakening. And it's not easy to do this. It takes a great deal of practice, mindfulness-based practice. When we act out of aversion or clinging, we cause harm. We cause harm to ourselves and cause harm to others. To be able to act with clarity in relationship to compassion, care, clear understanding doesn't cause harm. But it's not easy, again, to say it's not easy. So the second domain of mindfulness in our practice, contemplation of the feelings simply in themselves, the feelings in the feelings. So we'll begin our sit now. Settling into your body. Allowing the heart, mind to relax and settle. Sometimes helps to take a couple of deep breaths. And then just let the breath breathe itself naturally. Connecting to the sensorial experience of an in-breath and an out-breath, wherever it's most clearly and directly felt in your body. And noticing, mindful presence, noticing the pleasant or unpleasant or neutral feeling tone of an in-breath, of an out-breath. No expectation, letting go of the way it should be in your mind or shouldn't be, and just simply notice how it is. No commentary is necessary. Judgment unnecessary. expectation unnecessary. How is it? Other sensations in the body making themselves known. Noticing pleasant or unpleasant. Feeling tone in relationship to other sensations that show up as they arise, manifest, change, move, disappear. Pleasant, unpleasant, maybe neutral. Maybe thoughts arising in the mind. Maybe images arising in the mind. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Not getting caught up in the storylines. For this practice period, just noticing pleasant, or unpleasant, or maybe neutral. And remembering to return to the anchor of our mindful presence, the anchor of the breath. This simple, beautiful breath. In, out, wherever it's most clearly and directly felt, sensorially in your body. Breathing itself naturally. Mindful attention, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. When commentary or judgment arises, thoughts, of course, they are, rather than taking them up, rather than going with them. Just simply notice as soon as possible, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. When the mindful attention spaces out, stay mindful. Notice if it's pleasant. Is it unpleasant? Maybe neutral. Keeping practice vital, alive, engaged. Relaxed. When the attention starts to wander here, there, anywhere, everywhere, be mindful of this. Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Is it neutral? Remembering to return home, so to say, to the breath. Just an in-breath, just an out-breath. However it is breathing itself. Noticing if it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. That's all you have to do right now. Are you trying too hard? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Is the body, heart, and mind relaxed, receptive, moment by moment? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Memories showing up in the mind, pleasant or unpleasant? Plans showing up in the mind, pleasant, unpleasant. An in breath, an out breath, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. an itchy spot arising somewhere on the body. Pleasant, unpleasant, not scratching. Mindful presence. Pleasant, unpleasant, maybe neutral. An embodied sense of sitting in stillness. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. a degree of agitation showing up in the mind, in the body. Pleasant, unpleasant. Simply returning home to one in-breath and one out-breath. The sensorial experience, breath by breath, just as it is. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. May all of the wholesome energies and fruits that manifest through our practice serve with immeasurable impartiality, without bias, without prejudice, towards the welfare, the happiness, and the awakening of all beings everywhere, which of course includes ourselves. And so now we'll take some time for 10 minutes of walking meditation. You could also do 10 minutes of mindful stretching meditation. Some of you may choose to stay sitting in the seat that you're in right now. And you can do some stretching meditation, moving your arms, your legs, your head, your neck, even your torso and your back, sitting in your chair. Make sure you move your body mindfully. And if you're walking, you might walk a bit slower than you usually do. You're not walking to go someplace. You're just walking 10 steps in one direction, 10 steps in another direction, approximately. And staying very mindful in the movement and noticing the physical sensations of walking, the physical sensations of stretching various parts of your body. And noticing, is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And in 10 minutes, now about 9 minutes, we'll come back together and I'll offer a Dhamma reflection. So we'll begin the Dhamma reflection today with the definition of mindfulness that I shared with you all last Sunday. Mindfulness can be understood as the active aspect of awareness. It's a non-judging, non-manipulative, non-grasping, non-rejecting orientation to the present moment's experience. And at its best, it's a purely receptive relationship to whatever phenomena is presenting itself in the present moment. An amazing aspect of mindfulness is that it has the capacity to connect directly and simply to any of the experiences that come through each and all of the 6 sense doors with what we call bare awareness. With this bare awareness, providing very immediate and direct access to these experiences, just simply being known. And sometimes we may experience just this, but at times, and maybe quite often, the direct, simple knowing of phenomena may almost always or very often immediately be colored or modified by various mental factors or various mental states. And this being the third domain of mindfulness, mindfulness of the mind. Pali Citta Nupassana. Mindfulness of the various mental factors or states of mind that arise in relationship to our experience of body, mind, heart. So, for example, we go to the marketplace. Maybe the marketplace of the possible lunch food display in your refrigerator. Well, lunch. Well, maybe there's some attraction. Maybe there's some aversion to the sights and the smells as you open the refrigerator door. And maybe as you're eating, maybe you're already wanting more of something before you've even finished chewing what's in your mouth. Or maybe the marketplace just a few minutes ago of where to do walking meditation. Or maybe even earlier today, which shirt should I wear today? What shirt should I put on today? Maybe the marketplace of thinking. So for instance, I think I'd like to have a practice meeting with Marcia at some point. Well, how should I report my practice to her? And maybe thinking about this and then rehearsing it over and over and over again. With an attentive mindfulness, we have the possibility of recognizing that often these attractions, these aversions, and these ponderings are rooted in old conditioned habits of maybe needing to be in control, needing to get it right, wanting to be noticed, wanting to be approved of. or in certain circumstances, thinking that maybe there's not enough. There's not enough because surely more of this or more of that will really make me happy forever, or at least for 10 minutes. All of this actually based in some degree of fear, rooted in fear, actually. In a moment of mindfully seeing, knowing this root of wanting and dissatisfaction, we might simply be able to relax and then let go, and then spontaneously respond in an appropriate and easeful way, really, truly in relationship to the situation. And I would say we certainly have to do this many, many times over and over again before we really get it. It's a practice. Living here in Taos, New Mexico, it's a place that, as some of you know, many people come to visit, specifically to come to the marketplace. A lot of beauty abounds here. I went through a period of practice quite some years ago where I'd walk along, soon after I moved here, actually, many years ago, where I'd walk along the street and I'd look into the shop windows and watch my mind and body. Awareness of seeing, just seeing various forms, colors, their attention. And then I would notice the coloration of the mind of wanting, leaning into, and even sometimes this strong desire of seeming need, the must-have mind, greed coloring a moment's experience of seeing. It was a very good practice in the midst of the marketplace. And it can be a very good practice in the midst of any marketplace. I continued this practice until I finally found myself more and more and more just often seeing the forms, seeing the colors, followed by simply and often joyfully and very often appreciatively bearing witness to the beauty that was being seen. To sustain and deepen in our practice, to see things as they really truly are, two of the most essential qualities of heart of mind that are required of us are honesty and humility. Pretense, self-deception, and clear seeing are mutually incompatible. So for instance, if another person notices that I'm feeling and maybe even expressing greed or some form of aversion, it does not matter if his or her image of me is shattered. What matters is that I'm willing to come face to face with these mind states, bringing mindful attention right into the greed or fear or anger or sadness. And is each of you, and every one of us knows, this is not always so easy. Tremendous interest, energy, and humility is needed to sustain the observation, to see yourself as you are. And because you see yourself as you are, without pretense, without self-deceit, and without judgment, you don't try to project a different image to yourself or to anyone else. Vimala Thakur, who was one of Krishnamurti's closest students and who was quite a profound and powerful spiritual teacher in her own right, said this about humility. She said, that is the only austerity that is required of an inquirer. The austerity of humility to see things as they are, to see my inner being as it is, good or bad, to observe it as it is without defending it, without justifying it, without interpreting or judging it, without taking pride in it, and without relegating the responsibility of those states to other people. She goes on, humility is the perennial source of energy or freshness. Humility enables you to learn to keep pliable, perhaps to the last breath, I hope, she said. In light of Vimalathakur's words, a story that the Dalai Lama has told about himself, he said that a number of years ago, he was taken window shopping in some big city, I think it was London actually, to an area where there were lots and lots of small shops that sell all kinds of small mechanical parts and systems. And the person who took him there to this part of the city knew that he was very interested and fascinated by the mechanical workings of things. For instance, he loves to take apart watches and work on them and then put them back together. The Dalai Lama said that he found himself looking in the windows of the shops. And at first, just simply seeing with a very open curiosity and interest. And then all of a sudden realizing that he wanted everything. He said he wanted all of it. And he said, I didn't even know what any of it was for. I just wanted it. So now taking a look at the marketplace of your inner world of meditation, the inner world of our meditation experience. So for instance, a moment of deep calm, a mindful moment of directly knowing this calm, not thinking about it, just it as it is, just calm, just tranquility. And then maybe followed quickly by grasping, wanting tranquility to never leave. Maybe even some fear arising about losing my tranquility. Without judgment, directly seeing and knowing this experience of attachment and clinging, fear rooted in fear. This is very much a part of our practice too. Mindfulness is able to know the mental factor or coloration of the mind of wanting, of greed, within the greed itself. Or the colorations of anger or hatred or fear or delusion. Any state of mind can be known within itself. Maybe from its very arising and its very particular characteristics, how it acts, and its changing nature, and maybe also knowing and seeing its ending, its momentary cessation. A moment of consciousness may be colored by faith, or by delight or peacefulness, or maybe by dullness or disinterest or resistance, or some other form of aversion. As I'm sure each of you have experienced at times, each of these mental factors, these colorations may arise in relationship to the bare awareness of any given experience, such as a breath, a sensation, a bodily movement, a visual image, a sound, a Dhamma talk, a taste, thoughts in the form of memories, plans, projections, fantasies, or images in the mind. Thai monk and Buddhist scholar Venerable Analayo says this: the element of non-reactive, watchful receptivity in sati, which translates as mindfulness, forms the foundation for satipatthana, the four foundations of mindfulness, as an ingenious middle path, which neither suppresses the contents of experiences nor compulsively reacts to them. One of the central tasks of sati, of mindfulness, is the de-automatization of habitual reactions and perceptual evaluations. Sati thereby leads to a progressive restructuring of perceptual appraisal and culminates in an undistorted vision of reality just as it is. And he goes on to say, this technique of simple recognition constitutes an ingenious way of turning obstacles to meditation into meditation objects. Practicing this way, bare awareness of a hindrance becomes a middle path between suppression and indulgence. Important aspects of mindfulness, important aspects of sati are bare and equanimous receptivity, combined with a broad and open state of mind. In the Abhidhamma, which is a very clear and a detailed treatise on the workings of the mind from a Buddhist perspective, there's a very long and detailed list of the many and various mental factors that may quickly come along to accompany and color the bare awareness of any present moment experience. This degree of perception and distinction with such minute detail regarding each and all of these states of mind, it's not really absolutely necessary for our practice. It's enough for you to be mindfully aware of the more usual or the more ordinary colorations of any given moment of consciousness as they arise and as they quickly change and as they cease. So for instance, mindfulness knowing delight, joy, attraction, mindfulness knowing preferring, mindfulness knowing faith, appreciation or liking, and mindfulness knowing dislike, judgment, disappointment, clinging, attachment, fear, anger, hatred, or irritation. Knowing any of these mind states in relationship to the bare awareness of the experiences of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, moving, touching, or thinking. And again, the essential nature of mindfulness is that there's no attitude of judging or discriminating between right and wrong, between good and bad. It's just this in this moment, whatever it is and however it is. Within mindfulness itself, there's no grasping, no rejecting, no manipulation, no judging or evaluation of experience. Mindfulness is a profound and transformative phenomena or experience or capacity or quality that we are learning. So this is the third establishment, the third domain of mindfulness, mindfulness of the mind, mindful awareness of mental factors, mindful awareness of states of mind. Are you mindful of your mind? You might ask yourself, how driven am I by my desires? How driven am I by my attachments? How driven am I by my resistance? How driven am I by my aversions? The last aspect of mindfulness that the Buddha points us to is the contemplation of Dhammas. And Dhammas in this case can be translated as the truth, the way of things, the natural laws. This domain of mindfulness, mindfulness of Dhammas, can be grounded specifically in any of the 6 sense doors: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or thinking. It can also be grounded in the 5 so-called hindrances: sloth and torpor, restlessness, doubt, or the grasping mind or the aversive mind. The really wonderful and illuminating specialty, so to say, about this 4th domain of mindfulness is that whatever our experience is, be it physical or mental, is seen through the doors of Dhamma, is seen through the door of the nature of things, through the door of how it is, the door of truth. So, for example, one of the insightful doorways that we open with this 4th domain of mindfulness is that of the 3 universal characteristics that all experience of body and mind are imbued with. We can directly pay attention to, recognize, and clearly come to know that every experience of mind and body is always changing, is anicca, is impermanent. Each and every phenomena of body and mind, as well as everything we perceive around us, begins and ends, arises and disappears. There are hundreds, thousands, millions actually, of little endings, deaths, moment to moment to moment, breath by breath. As practice deepens and matures, it gets easier and easier to open to, clearly see, accept, and surrender to this perfectly natural truth. What appears to be a steady flow of experience, even with the presence of consciousness itself, is not as we ordinarily perceive it. The reality of body-mind experience and even consciousness itself can be likened to the separate frames of a film. The illusion, the delusion being as though it's happening in an ongoing, continuous flow, when in reality, it's all beginning and ending, arising and passing away on the most minute level, second by second by second. And because of anicca, because of impermanence, no experience that comes in through the 6 sense doors is ultimately or permanently satisfying. And we continue on through our lifetime, searching for something, some experience that will finally and totally satisfy. Finally make us totally and endlessly happy. This unsatisfactoriness and the endless search for satisfaction is what the Buddha called dukkha. And dukkha is usually translated as suffering. And that's the baseline or the orientation of the suffering that the Buddha is talking about. The endless search for satisfactoriness. And this is the second universal characteristic. The last of the three characteristics that we may come to know within this fourth domain of mindfulness is anatta. The truth that all experience, that all phenomena is selfless, is totally interdependent, and is constantly changing. In other words, all phenomena is totally contingent in its existence, both within its seeming, and I say seeming, solidity, as well as in its seeming set or static place in the world. And our bodies, each of our bodies, being an immediately available example of this, with all parts and all functions being completely and totally interdependent, and all of it constantly in flux. All is anatta. All is empty of any separate, solid, sustaining self. As we begin to directly experience and to know anicca, impermanence, and unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, the third universal characteristic of anatta, or as it's usually translated, of not self, begins to reveal itself directly through our practice of mindful awareness quite naturally. It quite naturally shows up. And we begin to truly understand that no matter how hard we try, there's absolutely nothing that can be clung to. Even our often very tightly grasped, seemingly set in place self-identities, the positive or wholesome identities, as well as the negative or unwholesome identities. As we begin to intimately, experientially see and know these three universal truths, our relationship to our life begins to change. Wisdom, equanimity, relinquishment, and the natural flow of a creative and compassionate life quite naturally begins to blossom within this seeing and knowing as we start to relax more and more deeply into simply and more clearly being here with things just as they really, truly are. And so as we go along in our practice, and when we're ready, this fourth domain of mindfulness, mindfulness of Dhammas, opens up the beautiful door to freedom the simple and beautiful door of awakening, which we may experience just very briefly in a moment, with it eventually becoming more and more pervasive through our life. Within the whirlpool of our ordinary lives, which the Buddha called samsara, if we metaphorically stand still, cool, calm, focused, mindfully attentive, in that moment, we're no longer conditioned by ignorance. We're no longer conditioned by ignoring and being caught in the whirlpool of pleasant and unpleasant. We're no longer caught in the whirlpool of, I like it, I don't like it. No longer caught unaware in the whirl of continually, unwittingly moving around and around and around the wheel. In the midst of our ordinary lives, in the midst of samsara, we can stop and pay an extraordinary kind of attention, a mindful attention, and wake up. In some words from the Buddha, from the Majjhima Nikaya. He calls this teaching a single excellent night. Let me not revive the past or on the future build my hopes, for the past has been left behind and the future has not been reached. Instead, with insight, let me see each presently arisen state. Let me know that and be sure of it, invincibly, unshakably. Today, the effort must be made. Tomorrow, death may come. Who knows? No bargain with mortality can keep him and his hordes away. But one who dwells thus ardently, relentlessly by day, by night, it is in her, it is in him, the peaceful sage has said, who has had a single excellent night. And closing the Dhamma reflection, today's Dhamma reflection, with a teaching poem from Wu Men. Wu Men was an ancient Chinese Buddhist master who offered this both invitational and provocative teaching. "10,000 flowers in spring, the moon in autumn, a cool breeze in summer, snow in winter. If your mind isn't clouded by unnecessary things, this is the best season of your life." And let's sit silently for just a moment or two. Thank you for listening to the Dhamma. And thank you for your practice.